Hi everyone and welcome to a new tutorial. My name is Abdi for asART 3D and motion graphics. In this video I would like to show you how we can turn a non-procedural model from the Chaos Cosmos library, in this case the children's swing, into a procedural design like this, so we can change the size, the amount of the swings and a couple of other things. So let me show you how we can do that and just jump into 3ds Max. Here I already imported the model, and that is the proxy. And the next thing I'm going to do is just go to the proxy parameters here, to display, rollout, and make sure that my preview type is set to show whole mesh. And then I go and add an edit poly modifier, right click and collapse it. Say yes. So in this case, I just extracted the model from that proxy. The next thing I'm going to do is go to the edge, just for this model, and then double click on this edge, control backspace in order to remove it, because I don't need it. That will become kind of irritating in the next steps we do. So now, in order to work with RAID clone and make a procedural design element out of that, we need some segments. So we have to fragment it into different segments. And for this, I'm going to use a modifier which is installed with the RAID clone called RC Slice. That will do a great job and give us the possibility to define the segments that we need. So switch to your front view, and then this has the names of these elements that we need in our ray clone setup. So the names are actually exactly the same things that we're going to find in our ray clone setup. What that means, you're going to see that in a second. But just let me start to define the segments we need, and then we go from there. So for the start segment, it says start slash left, means it starts from the left to right. So we can increase this value, and as soon as I do so, you see a line appearing and actually showing you how long the segment will be that you are defining here. And I will just like go here and say this line is actually looking good, so we can go bring it back and round it up to 38. So my start segment will be 38 centimeters long from here to here, and that is, it's good. It's what we need. Now the end segment will be this side, and it starts from right to left. So from right to the left, we have to increase this value, and now that line appears. So we can move it on to here, maybe, I don't know what that is, maybe 65. So this will be the next segment, which is the end segment in our ray clone setup. So the next one is the default segment, and the default segment in RAID clone will be the segment that is distributed all along the path. In this case, it will be the bar on the top of our construction here. So now here, when I move that value or when I increase it, you don't see anything happening here, but I can tell you that that thing counts from left to right as well. And the first value that defines where your segment fragment will actually start. So in this case, we just need 10 centimeters of that top bar maybe in order to create the rest of it. And we can start cutting it maybe here and then from here to here. And now let me count. So these squares, each one is 10 centimeters. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That would be 100. So 110 would be my starting point. So let me go and set this to 110. And now the length of the segment I need is 10 centimeters. So when I type in 10 and then press enter, you see that first line is the starting point of my default segment, which starts 100 centimeters or 110 centimeters in this case from left to that line, and this section is just 10 centimeters long, beginning from 110 going to 120 if you wish. So I hope that makes sense. Now the evenly segment is the next one we need, and this is our swing itself. This is what we will distribute evenly all along our path. So that works the same way. So it is not showing you the starting line here. So we go and count again. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 5 would be just too close, maybe 45. So we set it to 45. And that thing we have to find out what it is. Just for now, I'm going to set it to something like 50. So as soon as I do so, we get those lines. So now this line is 45 centimeters away from this corner, from the left side, and this 50 is again from this line to this one. So that is the section which is now defined as our evenly. So let me move that in, and maybe I'm going to set it to 46 and here to 47. So now it is from here to here, kind of same value. So that is covering our entire swing. So now we have all the segments we need. We have the start, end, default, and the evenly segment. So we can scroll down all the way. I'm going to change that prefix to segment underscore, and then say export slices, and say yes. So it will go and export all the slices that we defined using RC slice. So you see that thing is now 38 centimeters, that is somewhere around 50, that is 10, and this is 65. So that is how we define. Now the next thing we have to do is setting up the pivot point. And before we change it, we have to just keep in mind that the value for the pivot points right now for Y and Z are set to 0, and we're gonna keep them this way. But before we select all of them, go to hierarchy, affect pivot only, center to object. Now with all that selected, go down to Z axis and press 0, and the same for the Y axis as well. So the only thing we change is now the X axis. That is okay for this part and this part. By the way, we can go here actually, and we have to delete this bar here. So let me go and center that again. So we have to align the pivot point for the start segment to this edge, and we go for this to the modifier stack, go to vertex selection, and that will actually select the vertices automatically, but if not, make sure you just select the vertices for this edge, and then go down to the X value and copy this X value. Then go back to hierarchy, affect pivot only, and paste that X value back to your X for pivot point. And we're going to do the same thing for the end segment. So go to the modifier stack, go to vertex selection, select only these vertices for this edge, copy the X value, the X position, go back to hierarchy, affect pivot only, and paste the value for the X position back in there. So it is aligned with this edge, and the other one is aligned, and this one is aligned with this edge, which is perfectly what we need. So now let me switch to my preview, to my perspective view. Now select this guy, go to material editor and pick the material from our selection. Now select all these segments and add this or assign this material back to them. So now we can move them aside and start setting up our rail clone setup. So let me create a line which we'll need for our rail clone. That will define how long our construction will be. And now let me add a rail clone object into my scene and open the so-called style editor. In that style editor, we need a linear 1s generator. Then we need a segment and a spline. I'm going to link the spline to the spline input and link my segment here to start and select my start segment. And select this guy again, hold down shift and drag it down and do that 3 times. So we have 3 copies out of it. Now the next thing I'm gonna select is the default object. This is that one. I'm gonna link that to default. Up here. Then we need the evenly. So this is the swing. And we need the end object, which is the ladder here. So this is our end. So now we have to go and define our spline. And this is the line we just drew before. So there we go. Now we see just some boxes because we have to go to the display rollout and change it to quick mesh. So it will show us the meshes again. And as we are here, we also should activate use segment material. It will not show you that in your viewport always, but it will work when you render it out. And this is important to check because otherwise you would have to go and assign the materials to the Raycon object as well. But that makes stuff much easier. So now here we have some stuff we have to fix. The position of these things is not right. And this is because of the alignment of the pivot points here. So for the default segment, we go and set the z-axis to pivot, which will use the original pivot point that we set before. And we will do the same for the y-axis. This is why it was important to keep those values as they were. And we're going to do the same thing with the evenly. For evenly, we don't need to have to change the x-axis. But again, the y, we're going to set it to pivot, and for the z-axis as well. That brings them up to the place. Now for the start, we have to change the x because we aligned it with that edge. So we go to pivot, the same for y and for x-axis. And the end is the same thing. So we set everything to pivot point for start and the end point. And everything else is actually okay. So now there is a gap between the swing and the top bar here. Everywhere where we have a swing, we have a gap as big as the swing itself. And we can go and fix it by selecting the evenly segment and then go to the fix size. Make sure the scale segment is unchecked. And then set the X value to something like 0.05, and this should fix it. So that will fix those gaps. Now our first part of the setup is done, so we can actually go and tweak our line here. So as long as we want it, and it will just add those swings accordingly to the length of our path. So now we would like to go and change the distance of those swings. Let me just push these guys to a new layer and hide them. So we want to go and change the distance between those swings maybe. And this is something you can do in the editor itself, selecting the generator and then go to the rules and down here to evenly. And evenly you see the mode is set to distance and the distance is set to 100, which means each swing here is now 100 centimeters away from the other one, center to center. So if you change this to something like 60, then they get closer to each other and more of them can be placed in here. So, but we don't want to come back to this setup and to this editor all the time. We want to change the distances here, and we want to have just a controller which allows us to do that right from these parameters rollout. And we can do that by selecting the generator, right click, go to export parameters, go to evenly and select evenly distance, press OK. That gives you an evenly distance input, and we can drag it out, go to parameters and add a numeric parameter in here. Set the type up here to scene unit, and I'm gonna set the limits to 70 centimeters minimum, so they are not going this way and you know, squeeze together. So now if we go down here in our parameters rollout, you see the value is now in 0, but if I go and right click on this arrow, it will set it to the minimum value we defined here, which is 70, and that looks like this. So now we can go down here and easily change the amount of those swings. And if you go close or whatever, if you set it up like this, and then you change the length of your line, this is where you can see much better what really happens. So this is what we can do. So how we can change the distance between them and also the amount of them. So now looking at that, it might look interesting and stuff, but in my opinion, and I am not an engineer at all, but when I look at that thing, I don't think that this bar will be able to support all the weight of all the swings and the people sitting on it and swinging around. In my opinion, that will just bend or shatter in pieces. I don't know. But I don't think that that will work in reality. So what I would like to do is set a support element after each third or fourth swing that is hanging here. So in order to make that stronger and make kind of give it a sense of, yes, it could carry the weight of all the people or all the swings here. So for this, we need a support element, which we don't have yet, and we have to create it out of our segments that we have in here. So let me hide. Come on, let me just hide the big swing. And now I'm going to create the support segment out of this guy, which is our start segment. So just select it, hold down Shift and drag it, and make a copy out of it. And right away, we're going to just call it segment support. So now switch to the front view and zoom into that model. Add an editable or edit poly modifier on top of it. Go to edge selection, zoom in and select the bottom edges of this post and go here and click on ring. That ring will ring the selection all around the post, as you see, and select all the edges. So now the next thing we have to do is click on connect, and it will connect just all those selected edges and gives you a line or an edge right in the middle of your post. And this is exactly what we need, but we need the position of this line now, which we can see but we can't select. In order to be able to select that position or copy that position, you can go and hold down Control while that line is selected and click on Vertex selection. And this will select all the vertices for that selected edge only. And now we can go down here, copy that value, and then go up to affect pivot, also to hierarchy, affect pivot, and then paste it back so that our pivot point will move right in the center of our post. And the reason why we do this is because we're going to use the symmetry modifier, and that symmetry modifier will use the center of our post now and then create the mirror version of it. Yeah. So if you take a look at this guy, now we can see that these middle bars or the horizontal bars that are keeping everything together, they disappeared, and that is not what we want. So we can go and fix it by clicking on flip on the x-axis here, and that flips the direction of the symmetry, and this is what we get right now. So now we can go and add an edit poly on top of it, and I don't know if we need that guy, I don't think so. Delete that, and I'm gonna delete this top bar as well, since that will be get replaced with what we already have. So that is our support bar actually. Now let's go and make it a part of our setup in RaidClone. So we go and open up the style editor again. We make it a little bit bigger here so we have a place to show you what I'm doing. So move that aside and we move these guys away. So now the evenly segment, just hold down shift and drag it down in order to make a copy. And then go and select the new support element that we created. This is this guy. Now we want to tell RailClone that it should actually set a support or add a support element after 3 or 4 swings here. And to do that, we need a sequence operator. Now I'm going to unlink my evenly segment from the evenly input and link it to my sequence operator, and I'm going to do the same thing with my support segment as well. So now I can link the sequence operator to evenly, and this is what it gives us right now. So we have one swing, one support, one swing, one support, one swing, one support, etc. And this is not what we want. We want it to have 3 or 4 of these swings and then a support, and we can change it by selecting the sequence operator and set the value for x evenly to 3, for example. So now we will get one support element after each third of those swings. So when I make it longer or shorter, that will go and do that automatically for me. And we still can go and change the distance between them. And this is what it will give you. So having this setup allows you to do a couple of cool things, since you're not limited to a shape or to a certain shape or whatever. You can really have a fancy shape or whatever shape you want to work with. So let me show you something. You just divide it and go right click and smooth those vertices. Now we can go and move them around and create like some S-curve something. And that also works pretty cool. But sometimes you're gonna find some deformations that are not really good, to be honest. So sometimes this is what happens. So it deforms your mesh in a way that it just gets weird and unusable. And in order to fix this, we can go back to the setup, to the editor, and then select your support element, go up to deform and uncheck bend. And this will avoid that part from getting bent and will give you the right result, so without deforming it too much. And the next thing you may recognize is how edgy that thing looks. So if there is a curve like that, it looks pretty bad when we leave it this way. And there is a great feature which we have in RayClone, and this is called curve steps. So this allows you to smooth out the curves without going and dealing with the spline itself. So we can just increase this value to something like 50, and now you see that it gives you really smooth curves. You can even go higher to 100 or whatever, but this is what the results will be. So, and now there is a last thing I would like to show you as well, and this is that you can use the same segment, let's say the end segment and the start segment. You can use the same element for it, same object for it. So let's say we want to have the ladder on both sides, and instead of having one ladder here and one normal post there, I want to use the end, which is the ladder here, also as my start segment. So what I can do is just drag it up to my start and it will set it here, but now it is reversed. So as you can see, maybe that is not right. So it should be the other way around. So that part should be here and this should be there in order to connect it right. So we can fix this as well by using a mirror operator between the start and the start input and this segment itself. So drag it in here and it will go mirror it on the x-axis and it fixes this issue for you as well. So in this way we have just the ladder on both sides, and now we can go and tweak whatever we want and create our swing like this. And you can really have whatever you want as a shape. We can have a circular shape here and use that as our path and create some nice stuff with this as well. It depends really on what you want to create, what is the project about, and what are you looking for, etc. So it's up to your imagination, to be honest, what you can create with that. But just a quick example, we can just go and create that line and then change the spline to this, and that is the result that we get. So pretty cool stuff you can do here with an easy setup. So this is it for today, and I hope that this tutorial is useful and helpful to you. Feel free to share your results and your projects that you are creating based on the tutorials we have, and we are looking forward to see some of your work in our Facebook group or wherever you want to share them. Wishing you a great and successful time, and see you soon. Bye bye.